Hi, I'm Pam, and this is my monthly update video letting you know everything that I've been up to in the month of May. So, a few cool things happened this month. First of all, I finally got my first vaccine, which I was super happy about. Rollout in Canada has been going a little slow, but it's finally started to pick up, so I got my first shot of Pfizer on Saturday. The process was very easy, everyone was really nice, and yesterday my arm was pretty sore, but other than that, feeling very good. I'm hoping they can move up my second shot to earlier than it's currently scheduled for, which is in September. Other than that, I mentioned before that I needed to upgrade my computer. Yes, I know. I love you too. Thank you. And I ended up doing that in May. I basically built a whole new computer. I upgraded my motherboard, my CPU. I was running on an i7. Now I'm on an i9. I got new RAM, I got a new SSD hard drive to replace the almost 10-year-old mechanical one that I was using for storage, which the new motherboard just wouldn't even recognize when I tried to boot it back up again. What else did I get? I got a new fan, I got a new case, which you can probably see a little bit back there, which is a little more matching of my decor in here, so I'm pretty excited about that. I basically got everything except a new power supply and a graphics card, just because graphics cards are so incredibly expensive right now, and I really don't play anything that graphically intensive. I mostly use my PC to play sort of smaller indie games and things, and then of course doing my editing. It is definitely rendering videos faster, which I'm very happy about. So yeah, I might be able to give streaming another try again. If it's still having technical difficulties, then I don't even know what I will do about that. But yeah, that is it for updates. So for my shout out this month, I know, I see you. I want to shout out Lily. No, you're not the shout out. For my shout out this month, I want to shout out the channel Chips and Cellos, which is a video game inspired music channel that is very, very excellent. It is a trio of musicians that make 8-bit inspired tunes, inspired by Mega Man, sometimes Castlevania, and in addition to the chip tunes, they sometimes have classical cello arrangements and accompaniments with them. They're very, very good. They will do covers of songs like non-video game songs in the 8-bit style. Some of my particular favorites are the Mandalorian theme, which they did. They did Tiny Dancer by Elton John, which is a lot of fun. And one of my personal favorites, fellow Canadian Shania Twain's Man, I Feel Like a Woman. Just a lot of really, really fun stuff. Really well-made music. If you are into chiptunes and that sort of 8-bit kind of Mega Man style, then you should definitely go check out Chips and Cellos. Well, Lily's gone. I think she's pissed that she wasn't the shout out, so we will move on to pickups. And since I did basically buy a whole new computer, I definitely chilled out on the game pickups this month, not nearly as many as the last few months. So actually, and it's all new games and one vinyl. So the first thing I got was R-Type Final 2. This is the physical collector's edition. Again, kind of a surprise that this was put out on Xbox, just so because it's so rare for Xbox to get sort of smaller printings of things. Just got another box inside the first box. R-Type is honestly not my favorite shoot 'em up series. We've got the game here. It's a little bit slow moving, but at the same time still quite challenging. I've played this a little bit. I got through a few stages. I do find that the overall sort of menu and interface, it takes a really long time just to get into a game, and with this kind of game I feel like you should be able to start up really quick. But it's quite challenging, and I have been complaining and wanting some non-bullet hell shooters, which is what this is. So it's alright. I don't prefer horizontal, but we've also got a CD of the soundtrack from the game in here. And then there is a book. It's called The Art the artwork of R-Type Final 2, but it's actually more of an interview book. It's interviewing the Kazuma Kujo of Grand Zanella, so it's like the game designer or director. It's basically interviewing him about why he made the game the way it is, and not so much focused on art, but this is pretty good. I bought this physical. I was questioning whether I wanted it to spend the money on it, but then I looked, and digitally this was going for like $50 or something, so the physical edition was not very much more than that, so I figured better to have the physical than just the digital since it was already so expensive. A couple Switch games I bought. Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle is one that I've had before. It's actually the first game I ever played on Switch, but it got traded in, unfortunately, so I've just been keeping an eye out because I wanted to get it and probably play it again, and I went down to like $20 or something, so I decided to pick it up. This was very fun, surprisingly challenging at points. I really, really loved the Rabbids. It's the first game I've ever played with them. And the other one is a limited printing. It is Tanuki Justice, and this is a run and gun and in a sort of pixel art style, which seemed like something that was totally up my alley. So haven't tried this one yet, but it just came not too long ago. So the thing that I was most excited for this month, which I actually ordered a few months ago, is a vinyl. Dun, 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 dun. It's GoldenEye 007, the N64 game soundtrack, which is an amazing soundtrack. As much as I have no desire to play on the N64 currently, I played so many hours of GoldenEye when I was in high school. I remember my boyfriend in high school had an N64, and his house was like the party house where everyone would go to hang out, and so GoldenEye multiplayer was just going all the time. And since I'm an antisocial jerk, I was always like, I want to play through the single player. Why don't we ever play single player? So I ended up getting my own N64 so I could play the single player on my own. So it comes with this really nice book of just like artwork and things about the movie. A little postcard here. It's just the original soundtrack. It's got the whole track list here. I really like this insert. It's got information about the game, and then there's some artwork from the game as well. Yeah, just like cover art and things from the video game, which I really like. The actual discs themselves have a very interesting pattern on it. Honestly, probably wouldn't have been my first choice of pattern, but you take what you can get. And it sounds really excellent. It's a great pressing, great soundtrack. The only thing I don't like about it is that it has, what's it called? I think it's called a locked groove track at the end of each album. And the sound that plays during that locked groove, which means it'll just like play over and over, is just like the sound of a gun and then a body dropping just over and over. The first time I was listening to it, I was like, doing other things, and I was just saying like, what is that noise? Is my record player skipping or something? But no, that was on purpose, and it's not the most pleasant sound to listen to. I'd rather it just, turn off itself. But anyway, I'm super excited to have this. It's a fantastic soundtrack, and yeah. I just noticed that inside the case, which is very difficult to see, you've got all the characters, the character selection. That's awesome. So now on to what I've been playing, and I played through a number of games, as usual. The first game I played through is Jazzpunk, which is one that's been sitting in my Steam library for quite a while, and I finally got around to it, and it was really good. It's kind of hard to explain. It's like a first-person adventure game, but it's very surreal and very silly. It's got a kind of retro-futuristic vibe. You play a spy in the sort of 50s setting, and you go on all these different very silly missions, and you're sort of tailing people, you're doing random little quests, like collecting spiders to scare someone, or finding your room key, or dressing up as a woman to trick someone into giving you their suitcase, is all very, very funny. Really, really amusing. It reminds me a lot of 30 Flights of Loving. I think it might be the same person who made it, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But it's a very funny game. It's very short, like maybe 90 minutes long, and quite linear, but just a really, really funny story and funny situations you find yourself in. So if you like that kind of game, I definitely recommend Jazzpunk. You can probably pick it up for a few bucks on Steam. Another thing that I've been playing, which I've actually played before, is Dead Cells. I mentioned in my last What to Play on Xbox Game Pass video that Dead Cells, actually not my last one, I think it was a couple videos ago, but Dead Cells is a fantastic action roguelike game, and I had played it before and I decided maybe I want to try the harder modes. After you complete your first run of the game, you get a boss cell, and if you activate that, it basically makes the whole game harder. But I didn't want to just jump right back in, so I started a completely new save file, so I didn't have any of my weapons or abilities unlocked. And I got through with 0 boss cells pretty quickly, I think. And then once I unlocked the first one, everything just got so much harder. I finally made it to the point where I'm getting to the Hand of the King, which is the final boss of the run, regularly, but I have yet to actually defeat him. I also just realized, because I had just been playing through the main game and wondering why I had so many abilities and things weren't opening up for me, and I think I have to play the daily challenges, which I had just completely ignored up until now. So I've started to do that in hopes of, opening up new abilities and things that will make that fight go a little bit easier. But I sunk a lot of time into Dead Cells in May, and it's still just as fun, but the difficulty jump from 0 cells to 1 is incredible. And honestly, if anyone has any tips for me for the Hand of the King with 1 boss cell, I would be very open to hearing them. A game that I've been playing on a weekly basis for the last couple months is World War Z, which is a 4-person co-op zombie survival game. It's honestly a lot like Left 4 Dead, except if you're familiar with the World War Z book or movie, the zombies come in these giant, massive hordes. So it's not just about, running through the streets, picking off zombies here or there, maybe 10 of them come at you. There are times when there's literally hundreds of zombies just stampeding your way, and a big part of it is these places you get to where you have to set up defenses, like machine gun turrets and auto turrets and electrical fences and things like that. It's honestly a lot of fun, especially with a group of friends. I've been playing with the same group every Wednesday. We've got World War Z Wednesdays, and it's been a lot of fun. We played through the whole campaign on the first difficulty mode, which we realized afterwards was easy mode. So now we're going through again on a higher difficulty mode and trying horde mode, and it's a lot of fun. I'm not generally a big multiplayer person, but it's really good to coordinate your defenses and go be oh, there's a health pack here, oh, you need it most, you take it. It's really fun. So if you have a group of people to play with, then World War Z is definitely worth checking out. Now, there were a couple games I played that I ended up retiring just because I wasn't really a fan of them. I think I mentioned last month that I was looking for sort of dark and kind of depressing survival games to play, and a number of people recommended things, and some I decided to check out. One is called Iratus, Lord of the Dead, and this is basically, if you look at it, it looks a lot like Darkest Dungeon. It plays a lot like Darkest Dungeon, except that you play the Lord of the Dungeon and you're controlling the monsters rather than the heroes. And it just didn't grab me at all. It's very similar to Darkest Dungeon, and I love that game, but something about this just I don't know, it wasn't hooking me, the combat wasn't as interesting, the sort of meta game, which is the part that I actually tend to like more, about like building up a town or something, wasn't as interesting to me. So I played through a couple hours of that, just enough to not be able to return it on Steam, unfortunately, and decided I was going to put that one down. It just didn't catch my interest. And the other one that I played is called Darkwood, and I've heard many good things about this. One of my favorite gaming YouTubers, Ragnarox, made a great video about this game, and I liked his video much more than I liked the actual game. But it's a dark and surreal kind of thing where you're in this world where like the forest has crept in and monsters are everywhere, and you have to like do crafting and survival and stuff. But there's also a lot more combat than I was expecting, and the whole game is like a top-down view, and the combat is not enjoyable at all. And when I started it up, that wasn't what I wanted. Like, I didn't want to be fighting wolves. I wanted to be surviving and resource gathering in other ways. So I tried it. I actually restarted it a couple times. Like, I tried a little bit, learned about what I had to do, started fresh to hopefully do better, but it just wasn't grabbing me either, so I ended up retiring that one as well. But in May, I also finished one of the most fun games I've ever played, Yakuza Zero. This is a game I actually started for the first time years ago, like maybe 4 years ago, and I started it and it had one of the most exciting and fun openings I've ever experienced in a game, and then for some reason, I just never put it on again. I was playing it on PS4 and I was just like, I just didn't continue, and I don't know why. But it's on Game Pass now, and I started it up again in February maybe, and I've been sort of taking my time going through it, and it was just so incredibly good. I don't even know where to start with this game. If you've never played a Yakuza, and this was my first game that I've played in the series, this is a prequel to the entire series. You play as two different characters, Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima, and they don't meet really in the game while you're playing. But Kiryu is a sort of low-ranking Yakuza member who is framed for murder, and he has to sort of get his way out of that. And along the way, he gets into real estate, and that goes a lot of places. And then Goro Majima, he's an ex-Yakuza member, a sort of disgraced one, and he is running a cabaret club, and he gets into a really cool story, and it's just like such an interesting game. Like, it's got this open world, but it's like a contained open world. Both of them guys are in their own city, and you can wander around and you can eat at all the different restaurants, and you can like play arcade games and play pool or darts or bowling. Like, there's a million different mini games in it, mahjong. And then you have these like super well done, exciting cinematic story bits, but at the same time there's like cutscenes that go on forever. And while you're playing, you get into like these intense beat 'em up style fist fights. My favorite ones are Goro Majima. He's got a slugger style where he has a baseball bat, and those are like my favorite fights of the whole game. But it just goes all over the place. 1 minute, you're just fighting dozens and dozens of Yakuza coming at you. Then you're talking about real estate in a cutscene for an hour, but somehow it doesn't get boring. Then you're like in a shootout on the highway, and then you're buying up all the real estate in town to become the king of, you know, the city in terms of real estate. And there's just so much to do. Honestly, my favorite parts of it are the sub-stories, which are basically like the side quests. You'll run into someone on the street and they'll ask you for help. And the help that they want is often quite ridiculous. Like, one of the quests I did was teaching a dominatrix how to humiliate men, which was a lot of fun for me. One was getting the newest video game release for a kid who had been mugged and someone had stolen his video game. They're just like these really, really funny but also interesting side quests to do. They were so good. There's so much to do in this game. I think my game took about 35 hours when I finished it, but I wanted to go back and become the Cabaret King with Goro Majima, because that's another mini game where you run your cabaret club and you need to recruit the girls and like train them to be better at talking to the customers, and a customer will come in and you have to like assign a girl to be at the table with him. It's just really fun mini games. So I did that. I did his quest to become the Cabaret King. I didn't finish the real estate one because it wasn't quite as interesting, but it's just like such a fun game. And the story is just completely bonkers, and just when I thought it couldn't possibly get any more exciting, somehow it managed to top itself. So yeah, if you haven't played Yakuza Zero, definitely play it. Some of it's overwhelming, like a lot of the mini games, like the arcade and pool and stuff, like I didn't really have an interest in that, but like the side stories and the two main things of like the real estate and the cabaret were really interesting, and the story was great, and the characters were great, and yeah, play Yakuza Zero. I also played through a shorter RPG called Cthulhu Saves Christmas, and this is like a turn-based sort of JRPG style game where you play Cthulhu, but someone has kidnapped Santa Claus and you need to go and get him back because he's supposed to give you the power to destroy the world. And this was very cute. What I liked most about it was that A, it was short. It was only like a 6 or 7 hour RPG, which is always nice. And B, it was just funny and there were so many Christmas puns in it. I found that quite enjoyable. It's got a very simple structure. You're in a town and you can like pick where to go in town to either like spend time with one of your party members or go visit some other people, and it's just a little scene that plays out and then you get a piece of equipment at the end, and you do that a few times and then you go to a dungeon and do a bunch of fighting and then you go back to the town. So it did honestly get a little bit repetitive after the first couple, loops through that. The combat was interesting, the skills were interesting, but it did get a little old, a little fast. So even at only that 6 or 7 hours, it did sort of drag on after a little while, but I did quite like the comedy in it. Also, just yesterday, I played a game called Strangeland, and this is a classic style point-and-click adventure. It is by the same developers, whose names are now escaping me right now, who made the game Primordia. If you've heard about that, it just released sometime maybe a week ago, and it is a very striking game. Like visually and in terms of audio, it's very well done. It's like a psychological horror type game. Actually, when I first started, it reminded me a lot of Sanitarium, and you play a guy who's obviously built up some kind of world in his head that he is now going through and sort of constantly punishing himself. And as he goes to this place, it's like a big circus tent, and he goes in and he sees a woman throw herself down a well and kill herself. And it's his goal to save her, and he has to go through all these sort of horrific trials and meet these interesting characters in order to sort of find her and find out what is ultimately going on. And it was pretty good. It was, again, the aesthetic of it was so good. Like the artwork in particular was just absolutely stunning. And the voice acting as well was really, really good. The puzzles also pretty good. There's also an in-game hint system, which I always appreciate. There's a phone booth and you can dial 0 in order to get a hint on what to do next. And, adventure games can sometimes be a little obtuse, and this one wasn't too bad, but it's always nice to be able to just, get that help in game rather than look for an external guide. And overall, I quite liked it. The story was maybe a little predictable in the end, but just, the environment and everything, the sound effects were so well done that I played through the whole thing in a day. And last but not least, maybe, is Little Nightmares 2. I played Little Nightmares 1 when it came out, and I had very mixed thoughts on it, and I also have very mixed thoughts on the sequel. It's just like ups and downs. Like, it's a game that when I turned it on, I was like, oh, someone took Inside and Limbo and just mashed them together into one game, because that's really what the first chapter of the game looks like. You play a little creature boy, maybe, and he's going through this woods. He eventually finds the character from Little Nightmares 1, and they go through the world together. And having a companion in the game is really good because you get to work together to do the challenges and solve the puzzles, which I really liked. But they also include combat, which is bad, and a lot of trial and error, which is also bad. There's 5 chapters in the game, and chapter 1 was okay. I enjoyed it well enough. You're going through a forest, someone's chasing you, you have to sort of like hide from them or avoid traps on the ground, things like that. But then you get to chapter 2, and there are these action segments and these stealth segments that just drove me up the wall. I actually rage quit this game, I think 3 times between chapter 2 and chapter 3. I started it last month, and I just I would have to just put it down for a week or 2 because I would get so mad at these scenes. As I said, the combat is not good. Like, the character will pick up a hammer and have to very slowly hit enemies with it. That wasn't particularly fun. Some of the checkpoints just seem like they're so far away. When you're doing stealth segments, a lot of it is just about waiting for the bad thing to go away. And if you don't wait, you get sent back what feels like forever to the start of this stealth segment and have to do it all again. And it just really killed the pace of the game when that kind of stuff happened. And sometimes they would also be really misleading. Like, there was this one section in a school where you have to run down this hallway and enemies are jumping at you and you're trying to get away. So in the room before, you had fought, so you had a hammer. But then you go into the hall and you do this run. I wasn't sure, is this a fight thing or is this an escape thing? So I died the first time, and it respawned me in the hallway with no hammer. So I assumed, oh, okay, this is an escape segment. It turned out it wasn't an escape segment, and I had to backtrack to the previous room to pick up the hammer and take it and fight off the enemies in the next room. So just things like that made it very, very frustrating. The game has an absolutely beautiful look to it. It almost looks like puppets or paper craft. The whole thing is these dioramas, so it's 3D in that it's got a lot of depth to it, but you have a fixed camera angle where you're just looking into the screen, which looks really good. All the monsters are very, very unnerving looking, but it also causes a problem, especially for fighting, with just that depth perception and, knowing exactly where you are and how far away enemies are from you and things like that. So chapters 2 and 3, which were a hospital and a school, just full of those segments that just were driving me up the wall. But then I got to chapter 4, and it was so good. It was scary in the best possible way. As someone who was absolutely traumatized by the movie The Ring, and also Poltergeist when I was much, much younger, it's a world you go through and there's just all of these TVs, and there's what's basically a Slender Man chasing you, and it's just so scary and unnerving and well done, and it was lacking those really bad trial and error segments. And then as you get into the 5th chapter, it's also really well done and lacking those things. So it was just like, again, such mixed feelings on this game, because chapter 1 was alright, chapter 2 and 3 just like were awful, I hated them, but then 4 and 5 were really great. And as a whole, the game is very just like visually very well done. The whole thing about having like a companion and going through things together, sometimes losing track of them, was very well done. So yeah, I don't really even know what my final thoughts on this game are, because it was just like such highs and lows, and I don't know if I recommend it. Like, if you really liked the first one, you'll probably really like this one as well. But if you are easily frustrated by like odd controls, and also sometimes things like glitch a little, like you'll get caught on some terrain or something, which was very frustrating, especially in those segments, you might find yourself rage quitting too. So yeah, Little Nightmares 2, very, aesthetically very impressive and often quite unnerving. Like, not scary in a jump scare way, but just scary in a like, oh, I don't like what I'm seeing on screen right now kind of way. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Little Nightmares 2. Alright, so that's it for my May update. Leave me a comment, let me know what you've been playing, if you got any interesting pickups, what you think about any of the games that I talked about. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Before you go, don't forget to check out Chips and Cellos and give them a subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.